The Price of Fame, a science fiction audio short by Wormhole Dreams. Copyright 2024 Wormhole Dreams, all rights reserved.
The afternoon sunlight glared off the shattered glass that littered the Manhattan street, reflecting the broken remains of my dreams. The words of my now former bandmates echoed in my head.
George, listen, you're a good bass player, but your skill level is not right for this band. We've found someone else. I'm sorry.
I stared down at the cracked pavement, struggling to keep it together. Diane, my ever-supportive girlfriend, and an accomplished ER doctor met me for lunch and gave my hand a reassuring squeeze as we walked down 7th Avenue in Greenwich Village.
They don't know what they're talking about, George. You're a talented musician, and one day they'll realize what they lost.
Thanks, Diane, I mumbled, but her words did little to console me. My dream of becoming a successful musician in New York seemed more unattainable than ever. I felt like a failure. Diane had a night shift to work at her clinic, so later that evening, I found myself in a dimly lit bar, nursing an IPA and contemplating my future. I was considering giving up music altogether when the familiar chords of a song caught my attention. On stage was Mike Williams, a guitarist I had played with just last year. His fingers danced effortlessly across the fretboard, and his voice soared with newfound confidence. It was incredible. He sounded like a completely different musician. After his set, I called out, waving him over to my table. "Hey, Mike!" He spotted me and grinned broadly as he approached.
George, long time no see, man. What brings you here?
Actually, I just got fired from my band, I admitted, taking a swig of my beer. They said I wasn't good enough, and they found a better bassist.
Ah, screw them. You know what they say. Any band you're in is on the verge of breaking up or firing you. Let it go. You're a great musician, George. Look at me. I was in the same boat not too long ago, and now look where I am.
About that, what the hell happened to you, man? You've improved so much since the last time we jammed together. What's your secret? Mike glanced around nervously before answering.
It's a long story, George, and one I don't talk about. But you're an old friend, so let me buy you a drink, and I'll tell you all about it.
That's a deal, I said, eager for any advice that could help me get back on track. As Mike waved over the bartender, I couldn't help but wonder what had changed so drastically in his life, and whether my own dreams of musical success were still within reach. My fingers tapped nervously on the bar counter as I watched Mike take a long sip of his drink. He seemed to be weighing something in his mind, and I couldn't help but feel anxious about what he was going to say.
All right, I wasn't planning on sharing this, but I think you deserve to know.
Know what? I asked. My curiosity piqued.
Remember how I mentioned that I was in a similar situation to yours not too long ago? Well, one day, when I was feeling particularly down about my music career, I ran into someone who offered me a chance to improve my skills like never before.
Sounds like a scam, Mike. I've tried the latest miracle guitar lessons, shortcuts, and hacks. They never seem to make much of a difference.
This isn't like any lesson you've ever taken, George. It's not lessons at all. It's some kind of technology, something that works instantly and costs next to nothing. Trust me, it's a game changer.
He picked up my beer, pulled out the napkin, and scribbled on it.
Go to this address and tell them I sent you.
Mike, this sounds a little sketchy, I said hesitantly, taking the piece of paper from him.
George, look at me. Do you really think I could have improved this much in just 3 months without some kind of serious help? Just trust me on this, all right? But you have to promise me you won't tell anyone else about this.
Fine, I'll check it out.
Good man,
He said, clapping me on the shoulder.
You won't regret it.
As I left the bar later that night, Mike's words echoed in my head. A part of me was still skeptical, questioning whether this mysterious method could really change my life like it had changed his. But another part of me, the part that longed to be a successful musician, couldn't help but cling to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the answer I'd been searching for. The pounding in my head was relentless, like a drummer trying to break through my skull with each beat. I groggily opened my eyes, cursing the sunlight that dared to intrude upon my hangover. As I sat up, I fumbled for the TV remote, hoping that the mindless chatter of morning news would help distract me from the pain.
Breaking news, the Russian ambassador has been assassinated just moments ago in front of the United Nations building. Witnesses say that an unidentified white male walked up and shot the ambassador, then turned the gun on himself. More on this story as the facts come in.
What? Damn, I muttered, rubbing my temples. But as shocking as the news was, it did little to quell the gnawing uncertainty that had taken root in my mind since last night's conversation with Mike. The address he'd given me burned a hole in my wallet, its promise both tantalizing and terrifying. Who am I kidding? I mumbled to myself, pushing off the couch and grabbing my jacket. What does a desperate musician like me have to lose anyway? As I stepped out into the bustling New York streets, the address led me deeper into a part of town I rarely ventured into. My heart raced as I neared the destination, wondering what kind of place could hold the key to my dreams, or shatter them completely. Finally, I arrived at an unassuming building, its facade betraying no hint of the secrets within. I hesitated for a moment before pushing open the door, steeling myself for the unknown.
Can I help you?
A man greeted me, seemingly appearing out of nowhere. He had an unsettling intensity in his eyes that made me uneasy. Yeah, I stammered. My name is George Dillard. Mike Williams sent me. Said you guys could help me?
Yes,
The man said, relaxing slightly and stepping aside to invite me in.
Mike mentioned you might be stopping by. We have something that can help you if you're interested.
Look, I said defensively. I've tried lessons before and they just didn't work for me. So, if that's what this is...
No, not at all.
The man interrupted, holding up his hands in a placating gesture.
This is not music lessons. What we offer is a device, a technology that can instantly improve your playing and singing skills.
Instantly? I asked skeptically, my mind struggling to comprehend such a concept. How is that possible?
Trust me, you won't be disappointed.
As I stood there, in that mysterious building, with its even more mysterious proprietor, I couldn't help but feel as though I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, one that could either lead to the fulfillment of my wildest dreams or the destruction of everything I'd worked so hard for. But in the end, I knew there was only one choice I could make. All right, I said, taking a deep breath. Show me what you've got. The man led me down a dimly lit hallway, the air thick with an unidentifiable musk. As we continued further into the depths of the building, my heart began to race and my palms grew damp with sweat. What was I getting myself into?
Here we are,
the man finally announced, opening a door to reveal a small, sterile-looking room. In the center stood a metal chair, reminiscent of those you'd find in a dentist's office. The sight reminded me how much I hated going to the dentist.
Have a seat, Mr. Dillard,
he instructed, gesturing toward the chair. With trepidation, I obliged. Okay, so how does this work? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He produced a small, rectangular device from a nearby cabinet.
Simple. This implant goes right at the base of your neck, right here.
He pointed to a spot just below my hairline.
It's barely visible, and it'll make you a master musician in no time.
Really? An implant? Are you sure this is safe?
This is exactly what your friend Mike has, and I assume you saw the difference it made for him.
I thought back to Mike's performance last night, the fluidity of his fingers on the guitar, the richness of his voice. It was undeniable that something had changed him drastically for the better. All right, I agreed hesitantly. What the hell, let's do it.
Great,
the man said, a predatory grin spreading across his face.
Now, there is one condition. You can't tell anyone about this unless you're referring another musician who could use our help, and one you can trust to keep a secret. Do we have a deal, Mr. Dillard?
Yes, we have a deal, I confirmed, too desperate for my dreams to come true to consider any potential consequences. And if this thing worked, I sure as hell wouldn't want to tell anyone where my talent came from.
Excellent.
The man moved behind me, and I felt a cold, sharp sensation at the back of my neck. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to calm my racing thoughts. This was really happening. Ouch.
All right, you're all set. It takes the device about an hour to integrate. You can try it out then, and if you have any issue with it, just drop back in and see me.
Thanks, I mumbled, rubbing the back of my neck as I stood up from the chair. The tiny implant felt foreign, like an unwanted intruder, yet I couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope coursing through me.
Remember, not a word to anyone.
He warned once more as I left the room. An hour later, with the weight of a secret resting on my shoulders, I stepped through the door of my apartment, feeling both anxious and excited. My fingers twitched with anticipation as I picked up my Fender Mustang bass, taking a deep breath before playing the first note. Plucking the strings, I froze in disbelief. The sound that emanated from the instrument was unlike anything I had ever played before. It was pure, it was precise, and it was absolutely mesmerizing. I couldn't help but laugh, a mix of shock and elation bubbling up from within me. Is this really me? I thought, my fingers dancing effortlessly across the frets as I perfectly played songs that I have never attempted before, and even complex riffs in the melodic minor scale that had once seemed impossible for me to master. I was totally stunned. Notes flowed together seamlessly, revealing a level of skill I could only have dreamed of attaining until now. I spent hours lost in the music, unable to tear myself away from the newfound power at my fingertips. With each passing minute, I grew more and more convinced of the device's effectiveness, and while its origins remained shrouded in mystery, I couldn't deny the incredible transformation it had made in my skills. The next day, armed with an unshakable confidence, I marched into an audition for an up-and-coming band called Constant Suicide that I knew was looking for a bass player. As I entered the room, I noticed the other musicians giving me skeptical glances, no doubt questioning my presence among them, but I was undeterred.
Okay, George Dillard, right?
The lead guitarist and leader of the band said, his voice dripping with condescension as he crossed his arms.
In your email, you said you are an expert-level bass player from New York. That's interesting, because we've never heard of you.
Well, New York is a big city, right? I said, faking confidence.
I guess it is. Let's hear what you've got.
Taking a deep breath, I began to play. My fingers flew over the strings, producing a rich, soulful melody that filled the air. Within seconds, the room fell silent, all eyes fixed on me, as I poured every ounce of my passion into the performance. When I was done, the guy just stared at me.
Wow, that was incredible.
He looked at the other band members who nodded in agreement.
Where the hell have you been hiding?
I hesitated, unsure of how to answer without revealing my secret. But then a thought occurred to me. Guess I just needed the right opportunity.
Well, this is it, bro. How would you like to play Forest Hill Stadium with us tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night? That's kind of soon, isn't it?
Not for you, trust me. I don't think you even need to see the song list, based on what we just heard.
The other band members nodded with enthusiasm. I was dumbfounded. For a guy like me, playing Forest Hill Stadium was just a pipe dream. I struggled to steady myself. Finally, I said, "Yeah, I'll be there." And with that, I was in the band, along with a promise of big money and a chance at the fame I had always craved. As I shook their hands, sealing the deal, I had never in my life felt exhilaration and excitement like this. It was intoxicating. Sunlight pierced through the thin curtains, casting a warm glow on my face as I stirred from sleep. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted into the bedroom, and I could hear Diane moving about downstairs. Reluctantly, I peeled myself from the comfort of the bed and joined her.
Good morning, sweetheart.
Diane greeted me with a soft smile, her eyes betraying an underlying concern. She handed me a steaming mug of fresh ground coffee before turning her attention to the television. As I sat at the kitchen table, basking in the warmth of the morning sunlight streaming through the window, Diane's voice broke through my reverie.
Why the constant grin this morning?
She asked, her expression a mix of curiosity and amusement. Remember that band we saw a while back at the Beacon, Constant Suicide?
Yes, I remember them. They were great. What about them?
I could barely keep the words in as I blurted out. They hired me, Di. They actually hired me. I'm in the band.
George, that's fantastic.
That's not all. We're playing at Forest Hills Stadium tonight. Diane's eyes lit up, and her smile matched mine. She wrapped her arms around me, squeezing tight.
I always knew you could do it.
As Diane hugged me, her eyes suddenly narrowed, and she pulled back to examine me more closely.
Wait a minute, George. You're an amazing musician, but how did you go from playing bars in Greenwich Village to headlining at Forest Hill Stadium so fast?
I was going to make up a story, but I couldn't lie to her, so I took a deep breath, steeling myself for her reaction. Well, I have something to tell you, and I know it's crazy, but I can play bass like a world-class musician now.
Really? How is that possible?
It's about this implant I got.
Implant? What are you talking about?
I turned the back of my head to her and lifted my hair so she could see it. She gently touched the tissue around the implant.
Where did you get this, and what does it have to do with your bass playing?
I hesitated, unsure of how she would react to the truth. It's a long story, Diane. I got it from a guy, someone Mike Williams referred me to. He said it would help me become a better musician. And it did, but more than better, I'm probably as good as any bass player in the world today. I tried to sound reassuring, but even I wasn't entirely convinced. The truth was, I didn't know much about the mysterious implant or what it was. All I knew was that it had given me a shot at great success, and I wasn't about to let that slip through my fingers. Diane's expression darkened as she realized the gravity of the situation.
You got this from some stranger. No, George, you have to get rid of it immediately. Who knows what kind of danger it could pose to you?
But I shook my head stubbornly. No way, Di. This thing has changed my life. I'm not giving it up.
You have no idea what the medical risks are from such a device, or even how it works, or what it's doing to you. I need to take you to Northwell right now and do a CAT scan so I can see what it's connected to and what it's doing.
No. My dream is finally within reach, and nothing is going to get in the way of this. Her frustration boiled over, and she rose from her seat, glaring at me.
You're being an idiot, George. This isn't worth risking your health and safety over.
A coldness came over me, and without thinking, I said, I don't care, Diane. This is what I want. This is my dream, and if you can't handle it, then too bad.
Fine, George. Be an asshole and risk your life for some stupid fantasy.
I watched as she stormed out of the apartment, a sinking feeling settling in the pit of my stomach. I wanted to run after her, to make things right, but something held me back. That night, I took the stage with constant suicide. The lights danced across my skin like an electric storm, pulsating in time to the pounding beat of the drums. I could feel the energy coursing through my veins as I gripped the guitar, my fingers flying effortlessly over the strings. Around me, the crowd roared, their voices blending into a single deafening wave of adoration as I killed it. I was the star of the show, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. But as the night wore on and the partying continued, Diane was nowhere to be found. I returned home alone, the empty apartment echoing with her absence. The next morning, Diane stormed back into the apartment, her anger palpable as she immediately turned on the local news. The headline flashed across the screen.
Look at this, George.
The news report showed a photo of Mike, my old friend and fellow musician, plastered across the screen, accompanied by the words, "Mayoral assassination attempt," in bold red letters. I choked on my coffee, my heart racing as the newscaster detailed the shootout that had ended Mike's life.
The shooter has been identified as New York resident Mike Williams, a 38-year-old man who died in a shootout with police after attempting to gun down Mayor Adams as he was walking out of the Dinkins Municipal Building to his motorcade. The mayor is unharmed, and there is no motive to explain the assassination attempt at this time.
George, this is terrifying. Mike had that implant just like you, and now he tried to kill the mayor. There have been other assassination attempts too, like the attempt on Elon Musk yesterday in the financial district. And don't forget the Russian ambassador. This can't be a coincidence.
I clenched my jaw, running my fingers over the implant at the back of my neck. My newfound guitar skills were nothing short of miraculous, but the idea that there might be a sinister connection between the device and these attacks was unnerving.
And George, you know my friend Denise at the hospital?
Yes, she's the one married to the New York detective, right?
Yes, and he says there's been other attempts on powerful people that haven't been released to the press yet.
Diane, look, this is all freaking me out, but I can't just give up everything now. The band, the money, the chance to finally make it as a musician. I just can't let that go.
George, your life could be in danger, or worse, you could be putting others at risk. Please let me remove the device. We need to be sure it's not dangerous.
I hesitated, torn between the life I had always wanted and the safety of those around me. As much as I hated to admit it, Diane was right. There was too much at stake to ignore the possibility. All right, I reluctantly agreed. You can remove it. But if everything turns out fine, I want it back. Diane nodded, her relief apparent. And so, with a deep breath, I prepared to face the unknown consequences of my decision, a decision that would change everything. The sterile scent of the diagnostic room mingled with the faint hum of machines as Diane guided me onto the table. She handed me a pair of protective goggles and began to prep the brain scan machine.
All right, George, just relax. I'm going to start the scan now.
As the machine whirred to life, I closed my eyes. My mind wandered back to Mike and the recent assassination attempts. Was it possible that the implant had somehow played a part in these events?
George?
Diane's voice cut through my thoughts as she stared at the monitor, an uneasy expression on her face.
I've never seen anything like this before.
What do you mean? I stammered, fear creeping in.
The device is attached to your brainstem in a way I can't fully comprehend. If we try to remove it without understanding how it's connected, we could cause extensive brain damage.
Is there anything else you can tell me about it?
Actually, yes, it seems to be connected to your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that helps regulate behavior and emotion. That part of the brain plays a critical role in inhibiting behaviors and regulating emotion by anticipating the consequences of actions. But listen to this. It's also connected to your auditory cortex, which is involved in music processing, so that must explain your enhanced skills. This explains everything, the reason Mike would do something totally out of character, why it seems to be associated with musicians.
Right, they told me not to tell anyone unless they were also a musician.
Exactly.
Wow, that's scary. Who makes this type of device?
This tech is advanced, beyond any medical tech I've ever encountered. I have no idea where it came from or who made it.
I clenched my fists in frustration and fear. So, what do we do now?
George, we need to tell the authorities.
No way. Look what happened to Mike. I don't have any proof of who sold me this implant. If I go to the cops, I might end up implicated in the whole thing.
I know it's risky, but we can't just sit on our hands while people are getting hurt or killed because of this technology.
Then we need to find the people responsible and expose them ourselves. And we need to figure out how to disable this implant before it makes me do something I'll regret.
All right, I might have a solution for that. Let me see what I can do.
Over the next few hours, Diane worked tirelessly in an electronics repair lab in the hospital. A technician she knew gave her access to the facility. She researched and tinkered until she had crafted 2 small electromagnetic devices designed to disrupt the implant's electrical field and render it useless.
Here, take this,
she said, handing one of the devices to me.
It's a crude device, but the implant only operates on a few millivolts, so this should disable the device without causing any damage to your brain. We need to test it first to make sure it's safe, but we can't do it here.
Thank you, Diane, I whispered, clutching the device tightly in my hand. It felt like a lifeline. Let's go then.
All right, just relax. I'm going to bring the car around.
As she left, I stood there in the dimly lit room, feeling the weight of the tiny device in my hand and hoping it could expose the people behind this twisted technology. Anxiety gnawed at the pit of my stomach as I waited for Diane to return with the car. The room felt smaller, suffocating me with each passing second. Then, out of nowhere, an inexplicable urge took hold of me. It was a compulsion so strong that it overpowered all rational thought. And before I realized it, my legs were carrying me away from the hospital and down the street. I panted, struggling to catch my breath while running faster than I ever had in my life. After about 15 minutes, I came to a sudden stop in front of Central Park Tower, the high-rise apartment complex where the city's elite resided. I stood there, gasping for air, not understanding why I had ended up here, but my body refused to move from this spot, as if drawn by some unseen force. George, I whispered to myself, trying to regain control. Snap out of it, man. My feet seemed to have other plans, however, as they guided me to the sidewalk beside the building. A nagging feeling in the back of my mind told me to look inside a nearby trash can, and when I did, I found a gun nestled among the discarded waste. Damn, I murmured, staring at the weapon in horror. Something deep within urged me to pick it up, and though I resisted, my hand moved against my will, grasping the cold metal. "Please, no!" I pleaded to whatever force was controlling me. The gun felt heavy in my hand. The urge to shoot the next person who exited the building was intense, and I fought with every fiber of my being to resist. "Think, George, think," I thought desperately. Then, like a lightning bolt, I remembered the device Diane had given me. With my last ounce of willpower, I fumbled in my pocket, grabbed the device, and pressed the button. A burst of energy erupted from the device, and an overwhelming wave of pain crashed through my skull. My vision blurred, and the world around me seemed to fade away. The sound of blood pounding in my ears gradually gave way to the gentle hum of fluorescent lights above. My eyes flickered open, and I found myself lying on the couch in my apartment, with Diane peering down at me, her face etched with concern.
George, you're awake. You're so lucky to be alive. I followed you and found you unconscious on the sidewalk. A group of people had surrounded you and were calling an ambulance. I told them I was a doctor, and 2 men helped me get you into my car. I brought you back here as fast as I could. I examined the device. It was completely deactivated, so I used my medkit to remove it.
"Thanks, Diane," I croaked, reaching around to the back of my neck and feeling 2 stitches. I don't know what happened. It was like something took control of me.
What do you mean? Tell me everything.
Okay, I got this overwhelming urge to run away, like something was compelling me. Then I found myself standing in front of the Central Park Tower.
Central Park Tower? Why there?
I have no idea, but it gets weirder. I felt drawn to a trash can on the sidewalk, and there, I found a gun. I knew it would be there.
A gun? Did anything else happen? Were you about to use it?
Yes. I wanted to resist, but the urge to shoot someone walking out of the building was overpowering. It was like I couldn't control my own body. My last shred of willpower was spent on activating the electromagnetic pulse device you gave me.
Thank goodness for that. We need to figure out what's going on, George. We can't let whatever is controlling you win.
Agreed. But where do we start? I don't even know how I knew about the gun in the first place.
Let's think, was there anything else that stood out to you during that time?
An address? Yes. An address. I caught a glimpse of an address just before I activated the pulse. It must be connected somehow.
Okay, then that's our next lead. We'll check it out together and get to the bottom of this.
We sat down together, poring over the address I had remembered, trying to piece together any connections or clues. Okay, let's think about this. Whoever created this implant targeted musicians, making us their pawns in some twisted game of assassination. That means they must know something about music or have an interest in the industry, right?
Maybe, but there could be other reasons too. If they can control anyone with an implant, why specifically choose musicians? What's the end game here?
I don't know. All I know is that I don't want anyone else to fall victim to this, whatever it is. We need to find the people responsible and stop them.
Agreed. We'll start by checking out that address. Maybe we can find some answers there.
As we prepared to leave, I looked back at my bass guitar one last time. Despite losing my skills, I knew that we had to expose whoever was behind this conspiracy. I just hoped that when this is over, I could somehow go back to being a regular musician. The address burned in my mind like a hot iron. The numbers seemed to dance before my eyes as I stared at them, etched into the cold brick wall of the nondescript office building. Well, this is it.
Seems that way. It doesn't look like much, does it?
Appearances can be deceiving, I muttered, feeling the weight of my recent experiences bearing down on me. Let's see if we can find a way in. We crept around the side of the building, ducking beneath windows and hugging the shadows.
Over here.
Diane hissed, gesturing towards a narrow alley. A rusty fire escape loomed overhead, its metal rungs beckoning us upwards.
Do you think we can climb that?
Only one way to find out, I grunted, planting my hands firmly on the lowest rung. As I climbed, my muscles strained with the effort. Diane followed. Finally reaching the top, we eased open a window and slipped inside. The room beyond was dark and silent, the only sound our own ragged breathing. "Stay close," I whispered, guiding us through the gloom with my phone's flashlight. We made our way cautiously down a dimly lit hallway, past closed doors that held who knew what secrets. I could feel the tension in the air, almost taste it like an acrid smoke. We stumbled upon a partially ajar door at the far end of the corridor and cautiously made our way inside. It appeared to be the nerve center of their operation, the beating heart of the monstrous entity we were up against.
I recognize this equipment. I've seen it before at a medical research facility I visited a while back. This is likely where they store the crucial data for their activities.
Without hesitation, Diane swiftly navigated the keyboard, downloading a substantial amount of data before discreetly sending it to her own email address. Wait, do you hear that?
Footsteps, quick, we need to find somewhere to hide.
But it was too late. Before we could react, the door at the end of the hallway swung open, and two men with guns stepped out. One was tall and had an overtly serious face. The other was short and chubby with a stupid grin. They looked every bit as dangerous as their weapons, eyes narrowed in suspicion and fingers twitching on triggers.
Who the hell are you?
The tall one barked, leveling his gun at me.
What are you doing here?
Easy, fellas, we're just lost. Yeah, took a wrong turn somewhere.
Lost?
The other man sneered, stepping forward menacingly.
This is private property. Very private. You shouldn't be here.
Look, we don't want any trouble. Just let us go, and we'll forget this ever happened.
Nice try.
Yeah, he's one of them. I recognize him.
The chubby man pressed the cold metal of the gun against my temple. I closed my eyes and braced myself. He looked around at the back of my neck.
The implant is gone. They found a way to remove it.
He pulled the gun away from my head and stepped back. The other chuckled.
Not a problem. Let's take them to the lab. The doc can put another one in him and implant her while he's at it. A 2-for-1 deal.
The room seemed to close in around me as the gunmen herded us toward a table, their faces cold and merciless. The harsh, fluorescent lights overhead flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls lined with high-tech equipment. There were 2 chairs identical to the one I sat in when my device was implanted.
Sit down.
The tall one ordered, gesturing at 2 chairs that faced each other across the table. I glanced over at Diane, trying not to draw attention to myself. She gave me a subtle nod, her eyes filled with determination. Just wait a minute. What are you planning with these devices? Why musicians? One of the men chuckled darkly, running his fingers over the gleaming surface of a small implant in his neck.
Because you're desperate for success.
That's right. But you won't care about that anymore. Once I became part of the circle, I realized I have a higher purpose.
What purpose? What is your circle's end goal?
Enough questions. Now sit in the chairs or take a bullet, your choice.
As the tall man gestured toward the 2 chairs, I noticed Diane's fingers subtly inching toward the pocket of her coat, where I knew she had hidden the electromagnetic device. The chubby one moved over to adjust the straps on the chairs. He looked at us with a sick grin.
Say goodbye to your free will.
Diane, mimicking the same evil grin, turned and faced the men.
Say hello to yours.
Before any of them could react, she pressed the button on the device in her pocket. The gunmen staggered back, clutching their heads in pain before collapsing to the floor. Diane and I looked at each other for a brief moment, then bolted out of the room. As we emerged into the dimly lit streets, the chill night air met us like a long-lost friend, wrapping around us with a sense of familiarity that we both desperately needed. We walked just fast enough to avoid looking suspicious.
Those people, who do you think they were? How did they create something so powerful and so dangerous?
Maybe it's better if we don't know. We can't change what happened, and I don't want some zombie musician coming after us.
Neither do I, but I have a solution for that.
She grabbed my arm and pulled me to the edge of the sidewalk beside a small bodega, then pulled out her phone and started tapping the screen. What are you doing?
I'm emailing all the data I collected to David.
David?
Denise's husband, the detective.
Oh, that's a great idea, Diane. Except, he will know it's you. Then we'll be involved.
Not a problem. I'm sending it through an anonymous email server that can't be traced to us.
Okay, perfect. And thanks, Diane. I know I could testify against them, but you know this is too bizarre and dangerous for us to get involved in. We have to let the cops handle it. Diane considered my words for a moment, and just as I thought she was going to disagree, she grabbed my hand and started walking. As we headed back home, I couldn't help but think about how my life had changed since the moment I'd let that device enter my world. How I'd been seduced by the allure of fame and success, only to have it ripped away along with my free will. You know, Diane, being able to play like that was amazing, but if that's the price of fame, then maybe being a mediocre musician isn't so bad.
You're not a mediocre musician. Now shut up and let's go home.
She looked at me with a knowing smile, squeezing my hand gently as we walked into the night, leaving behind the most insane week of our lives.
End of The Price of Fame, a science fiction audio short by Wormhole Dreams. Copyright 2024 Wormhole Dreams, all rights reserved.